Hey, dear listeners, thanks for tuning back into Greenhouse Gaslighting. Just a little housekeeping for this episode specifically. I apologize for how long it's taken to get an episode out. And thanks again to you guys for all your patience. Just wanted to say that this episode, while not graphic, does mention sexual assault, harassment, and misconduct as a topic. So if you are sensitive to discussions about this, by all means, feel free to tune out and do something you find more comfortable. I also wanted to stress that the views expressed in this podcast are the views of each participant individually and not reflective of any other organization or person outside of themselves. And if you don't believe me, here's Gabby to say it herself.
So I'm Gabby, Gabby talking. Everything I say is my own opinion. Everything I say comes from me, and I am not representing anything or anyone. Thank you.
So with that, let's get the episode back on a roll. Thanks again for your patience. And let's tune back in to Greenhouse Gaslighting.
After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
Welcome back to the Greenhouse, dear listeners. It's good to be back. I apologize for how long it's taken me to get to doing an episode. Life has been busy, and I'm not sure about you guys. Joining me for today's episode is our favorite guest, Gabby.
Hello. Hi.
And returning back to the greenhouse, Skyy.
Yay.
Okay, so just quick question for you guys. Like, has this been a bad week for everyone? It kind of feels like it has been.
I feel like I got all my bad weeks out of the way like 2 weeks ago, and then everyone had a shitty week this week, and I'm like, wow, this week's been pretty good, hasn't it, everybody? And everyone's like, I'm drowning. And I'm like, well, sorry. So I'm having the opposite experience of everyone else, but I was there about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I felt mine coming on, so I'm like, let me just plan accordingly, because I know like Monday it's going to hit the fan. And then it did hit the fan, but I couldn't predict how bad it was going to get.
You never know.
You know, sometimes you can't just, you got to light that green gas in the house, and sometimes it's greenhouse gaslighting. Speaking of people having bad weeks, let's cut to the chase. Andrew Cuomo recently resigned after a independent commission assigned by New York Attorney General found him culpable for several charges of sexual misconduct. Let's get into the stories, because we've all been watching Cuomo a little too closely, and he kind of had this lionized image post the pandemic response, and people flocked to him like he was this kind of hero, and we were critical for a minute, and now it's unfurling around him. So I just wanted to get your guys' initial reactions to the hoopla.
The hoopla. I will first like to say that he killed everybody's grandma and grandpa with his initial vaccine push, just how he dealt with the pandemic to start with. So you should never hold a person who actively did that on a pedestal for as soon as you figure out that happened. So it really isn't surprising. Someone who killed y'all grandma and grandpas just is a downright bad dude and does bad things.
He's just Italian. Come on.
He's just, I'm Italian. What do you know? That was the worst excuse for anything. I'm sorry. What can my hands just keep moving, and sometimes
you know Italians, we talk with our hands. Sometimes when I'm in a good mood, I grab a boob or two, huh?
Like that. I have never been so of anything that I sexually assaulted anyone, and I think it's really bad for Italians to just think that you probably sexually assault because you're Italian. What else are you gonna do? Is the Cuomo way?
This has been single-handedly the worst thing to happen to Italian Americans probably since the first round of immigration quotas in the 20s.
I think a lot of other things have happened to Italians that have been bad.
Yeah, I wanted to be surprised, but yeah. I feel like with his like COVID response, like Skyy was saying, like there were things that people swept under the rug because at the time it was like everyone's in high pressure situations, so it's like we kind of need somebody who's going to do things immediately, and so we're going to ignore things that don't look so good in terms of Cuomo, and all this just hit the fan at the same time, and I feel like it was kind of a long time coming. I don't know. I guess the way he speaks and the way he behaves has always been, he hasn't really changed his tune, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, this isn't like a, oh my God, like new information, 180. It's like, well, Cuomo's always kind of like, when he didn't step down initially, when the Attorney General's like report came out and he was just like, well, I'm not stepping down. It's not my fault. And you're like, well, duh. Like, and people are like, whoa, I can't believe it. It's like, well, duh. He's been like this the entire time. Like, this has kind of been his attitude. If, I've listened to a lot of his daily updates. He was doing weekly updates and all that. And it's like, this has always been his behavior and like attitude. So like, I'm not shocked at all. I am actually surprised he chose to step down. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I feel like that was a very political, very, I'm a good guy, so I'm going to step down because it's the right thing kind of move, as opposed to like anything else. But that's neither here nor there right now. But yeah, not shocking. Not shocking. Sad that we should be able to say that about one of the people that I feel like the country was looking to a lot, like during COVID especially. So like a lot of other governors, I know Michigan's governor, like Whitmer, was looking to Cuomo, and like a lot of other like Democratic governors who were taking action at the onset of COVID were looking to Cuomo because New York got slammed first. So yeah, it sucks that I can say I'm not shocked, but like, especially his reaction, I was like, of course, like naturally.
And he's always had like this, people call him tough. I'm not sure I find him tough so much as it is like he can whine without crying. That's really the Cuomo brand, is that he can really whine without crying. Like if I had to do the whole act, like I would be in tears. That's how pathetic I am. But
that's
like
what his brother does too.
Chris Cuomo does that on CNN
like,
all the time. Fair enough.
Just whines and just be like, things need to change, but I'm not gonna do anything about it.
Again, like, what was that thing where like Chris Cuomo got in a fight with some dude and like, I forgot what the guy said, but he was like, that's an anti-Italian slur, huh? You can't say that. But then like with Andy,
so bad.
with this guy Andy, right? I'm trying to remember that one question he got, and it was about the response to COVID. And then he just like goes, but you were there in the press conference with me, remember? When I said that the vaccine would be distributed into my ass? It would be distributed into my balls. Sorry to rip off a joke there from Cumtown, but it's just, he has that affect of like disrespect, but it's not as explicit as former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. It's not as outlandish. It's not as I mean, come on, we got to speak about great governors of the tri-state area here, but I mean, it's the bare minimum threshold to like be reposted on like a Democratic Party fan club group on Facebook.
Yeah, it's like he's towing that line of like, for a lot of people, like he feels like the kind of, I'm gonna get back to this, like the kind of guy you'd like maybe have a drink with or whatever. Like it feels like he's being a little personal and he's being like telling it like it is, and so he's like towing that line. And for me, I've always found it like unappealing. Like when he's like that, I'm just like, shut up, like stop. But like other people, I feel like these people who would post it in the groups or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, he's like a real guy. He's a real guy. And it's like, well, Cuomo,
he's a real guy in the sense of like, yes, you have a drink with him, but it's not like you call him as like, hey Andy, let's go get a drink. It's more of you're at the bar alone after a rough day of work, and then he's the only other person at the bar. He's like 10 chairs down. And so he like, comes over to you and starts talking to you, and it's like,
let me buy you a bourbon. I'm literally drinking gin. Why would the fuck I want a bourbon?
Something like that. Something like that. Like it's like if a stranger came up to you and starts telling you uncomfortable stories, they're not doing anything harmful to you, but you feel like this is happening at gunpoint.
Every conversation with Cuomo feels like gunpoint.
Well, it kind of was. I mean, that's the governor of the state.
Yeah. He gives me real creepy uncle vibes that, like, your mom just always told you, stay away from him. And you listen.
Like, he gives me, like, the guy at the barbecue, like, the neighbor at the barbecue vibes, where you're, like, you're standing there grilling, and he comes up to you, and you can't leave because you're grilling, and he just starts telling you things, and you're like, I don't want to be here, but I can't go anywhere. You have trapped me. And it's not, like, things that are, like, interesting. They're, like, things about him. They're, like, I'm so great. Here's all the things I'm going to tell you. And you're like, can you please, like, talk about anything else? Like, I really don't want to hear this, but you can't leave. You're trapped. And he's like, not even he's like the neighbor. Like, he's like, he just kind of wandered on over. And you're like, I invited him because, like, he's alone and just figured, like, he'd want to hang out. And you're like, well, great. Thanks. I'm happy he's here.
He makes me want to die.
Which is the funny thing in the testimony about some of the victims. And I'm not trying to downplay what they went through. It's disgusting that your boss does that. But the kind of pathology that Cuomo exhibits, it's kind of pathetic the way he goes about it. like you just, you're so successful at a young age. I find that very attractive. Would you like to go get dinner with me? I'm insisting. Like,
I insist. We go have dinner and maybe sex. Like, no. It's so creepy. And it's just like, no one wants to go and hang out with their boss in literally most situations, let alone have like a unnecessary sexual relationship with their boss. Like, they're like, you're already branded so much being a woman in politics, especially. Why would you want, especially pre like Monica Lewinsky and Clinton, like, why would you want to actively put yourself in this situation? And for all people, for Cuomo, he's not even hot. Like, it's not even like, oh my God.
Now Illinois Governor
so
J.B. Pritzker, that's a mensch right there.
He's so attractive. He has amazing morals. He's like nothing like that. It's just, this is your creepy boss trying to date you, and you're just trying to do your fucking job.
Well, I think, and if we're getting on to, like, the accusations and stuff, I think, and, like, Cuomo's defense, I don't even know if we can call it a defense, because he kind of just said, yes, I did these things, but actually it wasn't the way that it made it seem. Like, that doesn't really speak defense to me, but whatever, we can get into that. The one that really was appalling to me, though, was when he said that the one young woman misunderstood what he was trying to do. Oh, I was trying to help her, and she just, like, didn't understand it, and that's so sad that she didn't get it. And I'm like, this is an adult, like, this is she's a young woman, but this is an adult who understands things. And, like, she was even on, I think she was on CNN, flat out stating, like, no, I didn't misunderstand. I'm not a child. Like, I know when you're doing things that are inappropriate. I know when you're asking me things you shouldn't be asking me, when it's not okay. And to me, there's something, like, particularly sinister about, like, the way he was, quote unquote, defending himself as, like, this guy who is very helpful, and I'm trying to do something good, and I'm trying to really help people, or be nice to them, or be kind, and they're just not understanding, and I'm sorry they don't understand that. And, like, to me, it's just like, it's that circular victim blaming kind of language that circles back and says, it's not, I didn't do something actually wrong, I didn't mean it that way, but you took it that way, and I'm sorry you took it that way. And it's just this very creepy and uncomfortable. It's like, God, when I heard him saying it, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is like victim blaming 101, like, right now. Like, we're listening to Governor of New York do victim blaming 101, and then he tosses in things like, I've done so many things for women. And I'm like, get out of here. Like, what do you mean? Like,
no, that speech he made where he's like, as a New Yorker, I am a woman. I am gay. I am black. That's what he did for women.
Yeah, that's what
he did a lot. He did a lot.
Woman. No, it's truly bullshit, because it's like, how are you gonna tell me that I was not made uncomfortable from these experiences and in these situations? Like, that automatically is fucking bullshit. So he didn't even apologize. Like, I'm sorry I made you uncomfortable. I didn't mean to. Like, this isn't what I initially wanted. He's like, I'm sorry you felt uncomfortable, but that's not what I was doing. Fuck you for feeling uncomfortable. You shouldn't be so sensitive, you snowflake. Like, that would have been better. It would have been better, but like, that's what it was coded for. Like, he wanted to do the straight up Republican thing of being like, no, they're lying. But instead of saying they're lying, they're like, I didn't mean to do. He was using the I statements, and he understood what he was doing and trying to use every thing in the book that his fucking PR person gave him to manipulate the situation and make everyone's think that these women are out of hand for feeling uncomfortable because he actively made them uncomfortable.
Well, and that's like, it's when you listen to his speeches, like, again, even before accusations and pre all of this, right? Even the way he's a politician through and through, right? Like, he's kind of like, I think when I think politician, I think like Andrew Cuomo. Like, he does all the things that people make comments about politicians doing, and one of those things is that, like, circular language and kind of like the connecting things that aren't actually connected. So like, these things there's not a line of logic between thing A and thing B, but I'm going to talk about thing A and then lead into thing B, and it's going to make you feel like they're connected. And so you're going to kind of have like an emotional thread between the two. And he was doing a lot of that, but I think, that inherently is not a way that regular people talk. That's not something that's normal. Like, that's not something you do in conversation, because it doesn't make sense. And it's inherently manipulative. So I feel like when we heard him doing it in terms of these accusations, that really came out. And I think when that kind of language is not hit on the head perfectly, it comes off as kind of unhinged. Like, we're listening to Cuomo and we're like, what are you even saying? Like, you're saying, I hug everybody. I kiss everybody. So you abuse everybody? Like, is that your point? Because that line of logic isn't being managed like completely, because it's just asinine. Like, it doesn't make sense. So I think it was interesting watching that, just on a side note, just watching that breakdown of the way he answers questions and the way he presents information, breaking down in the face of something that's just, there's no way to spin it with that kind of political touch, I guess. Touch was a bad word.
Or excellent.
Whoops.
Yeah, I think ultimately what did it for me was like, when anytime something like this happens, there's an apology mixed with, but someone took what I did out of context. Like,
apology and an excuse.
Apology and excuse. Like, what did it to me, it was like, I've always kissed and touched people, men and women. And I'm like, okay, Cuomo. Well, okay, shout out bisexual governor, whatever.
No. Cuomo is queer coded. He assaults everyone equally.
Oh, when he said, there was a point where he said, like, he was like, men, women, all colors, or LGBT, and I'm like, Cuomo, like,
this is not helping you. This is making it worse.
I was like, oh God, please. And this is not the most recent resignation. This was the right after the Attorney General. So anyone who wants to go watch that, absolute pure. I don't even know what to call it. I don't even know what to call it. Wild. It's just...
But it was controlled. It was controlled. That's the thing, because it wasn't like unhinged. It wasn't raving. Like, he really prepped this statement. He really went through
the
this
bullshit that he was saying.
Mm-hmm. He was reading a teleprompter. You could feel that he was reading the
This was proofread. This was proofread.
Oh yeah, somebody wrote it, and his lawyer looked it over. Even the report, so he, at the beginning of that statement, like right after the Attorney General's report came out, he flat out, he was like, I think New Yorkers need to know the facts. And so you can go read the facts. My lawyer has written up like the facts. And I read the whole thing, his like lawyer statement. I'm just here to say there are no facts in that statement. Like, it's just all, I didn't do it. That's not what happened. He's like, you'll see the evidence for the opposite side that the attorney general didn't talk about. I'm like, all of this is just as circumstantial as the stuff you're saying is circumstantial. You're just banking on the fact that people aren't going to read this statement. It also had a typo in the first paragraph, which really bothered me.
There's so many people who read that and proofread that, and it was like, yeah, this is it.
It was probably more important to get it out.
Even if you don't want to read the whole thing, the table of contents is just pure. I'm like, this, it's like the facts. And then underneath it has every single woman listed by name. And it's like, unnamed woman. And like, I'm like, oh my fucking God. Like,
that is absolutely, oh my God. No one has ever wrote a book about the people who have accused them of sexual assault and be like, this is why they're wrong. Like, what kind of fucking, that is, he's one of a kind.
It was a lot. I mean, if you ever want to have quite the time. And then there was, the thing is most of it, it's a very long doc, but the most of it was just images of like other politicians hugging and kissing people, and there were like images of like
blackmail
Obama like hugging people from like the survivors of like Katrina, and I'm like, that's not the same. Like, he's hugging someone who just lost their entire, like, even if you don't like Obama, like, that's not the same fucking thing.
Also, there's plenty of politicians who have actually been accused and like convicted of sexual assault that he could have actually used, and placed those on the front, like people within his party or not, that he could have.
Oh, you better bet. Here. They were all Democrats too. It was like Nancy Pelosi, Biden, Barack Obama.
Could you imagine?
There were a few for Bush. I will give. There were some Bush.
Well, Bush is an honorary Democrat these days because he's mean to Trump now. They're or like, something.
Oh, you're not Trump. You are a Democrat. We love you. Could you imagine Nancy Pelosi? So you just bitch slap her. She judges you wrong. Then she flies on the other side of the room, dead. She is not.
No, but could you just imagine, if Nancy Pelosi, inappropriately touching someone? Good morning. Sunday morning. Good morning.
I was like, oh shit, she malfunctioning again. Somebody take her to get fixed. But that's wild.
I will appreciate
a picture book.
I will appreciate that at the start of his statement, he said, "So let's start New York tough." I do appreciate that much. You know what?
He said, "I'm built for tough, but New York."
When the New Yorkers are proud, and he executed that character to the end. Props to a real one. You never see anything like that these days.
He's really trying to make it a culture war, but he knows he can't make it a Democrat and Republican one, so he's got to make it a New York and Italian one against everybody else, which is just absolutely ridiculous, because if you're wrong, you're wrong. You should just admit that, and you should just try to be better.
So this is probably a good topic maybe to segue into the kind of or the types of Democrats. You know what I mean? We all of us on Twitter love talking about guys who don't exist but do a thing that we find annoying. But I feel like a useful use of that character would be to maybe sort out your types of male Democrats, because they really seem to only come in two main varieties these days. The first kind is the Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg type. Just a man, but he's not sexually threatening as far as you can tell. He is just earnest in a way that's unnerving. And he probably has never done anything inappropriate because he has no interest in doing anything inappropriate or appropriate in that context.
Right. He has no real sense of agency of being a person.
Well, it's not just that. It's like they're so driven by ambition. You don't have to worry about them acting inappropriately in a sexual sense, but it makes them all the more unnerving. And then you have this legacy type, the Joe Biden types. That's actually a model that's out of commission. You know, they're like old Pontiac cars. You're never going to see them again, but God, do you love to see them go. You'll never get backup parts for them. But then the second kind is Cuomo or Rahm Emanuel. And there's this like, I don't know how else to say it other than there's like a Democratic gangsterism that these guys operate on. And this is not an anti-Italian slur, guys. I'm not saying that he's mobbed up because he's Italian. That's not how I'm running with this. But more of these kind of guys who are able to successfully build this tough guy image. So when you have guys like Rahm Emanuel who are vehemently opposed to people from the left flank, he was notorious for calling progressives the R slur. So when it came to like working with them, or when you have guys like Cuomo, because of his initial refusal to balk the trend on how Trump was handling COVID, yes, it makes sense. But then also when it came to how the vaccine distribution was handled, I think this is a good point to bring that up, because we're coming into the troubles with the Delta variant. We're coming into some of the failures of the initial COVID response where, yeah, we have the vaccine out, but there seems to be no real force behind getting people vaccinated or getting people safe. Cases are going back up. And I kind of, in my estimate, I hold some of these Democratic governors who initially spoke up and then kind of fumbled the ball on this as culpable. And Cuomo was particularly monstrous in this case because of his refusal to let the vaccine go to anyone and everyone who needed it, especially in NYC, which was one of the hardest hit areas in the country. So I'm wondering that with Cuomo's fall, are we going to see an uptick in Democratic gangster types, or is this too going to be a legacy type of Democrat that we're going to see less and less of?
In my opinion, I think we're going to see less of them in the actual front roles and like actually being the politicians. And a lot of them are just going to continue to be those donors and lobbyists.
Chief of staff type thing.
Yeah, that are in the background, like controlling the puppet strings. But the people that you never think of, because those people love to do like sexual assault things. They love to be these evil people, but they are like, look, I'm a Democrat and I say that women should have rights, so I'm good. I can do all of the horrible things in the world. So I think we're going to see less of them on the forefront and them just like crawling behind the shadows so they can continue to be absolutely horrible. And then there's going to be some probably fake progressives that pop up who have them as their chief of staffs and throughout their entire like campaign. And they're still going to do the evil shit, just a little bit more hidden.
I feel like, so obviously none of us know, but I almost feel like there might be kind of room to talk a little bit about, so we've talked, I know on here in the greenhouse, before about how Democrats kind of just lay down and let things like go, and like Republicans are more willing to play the game, and how we kind of wish Democrats would like play the game too a little bit, even if it feels a little slimier. And I almost feel like the Cuomo types are the types that will play the game and kind of skirt the rules and do those things. And so I almost wonder if we're kind of in a trajectory where these people do have a forefront space in the stage, because Republicans have been playing the game like this for years, and now there's like a recognition that it needs to be played on the other end too. And these people are the ones who are more willing to do it because they are the more domineering types. So I could see it going exactly how Skyy said it would go. That feels completely like plausible, but I could also see the opposite, where they start to come into the forefront because there's this like movement of like, we need stronger leaders to be willing to push. And them ending up looking like this, because a lot of these people in these positions who are these strong-arming Democrats are the types who have had these positions for years, or whose families have had the positions, or who have really strong bases. So they don't have to be as scared of, not getting elected back in because they piss people off, because they just have this name recognition, this money, the connections, that they don't really have to be concerned about it, in my opinion, until something huge like this happens where the whole country starts hating Cuomo at the same time, and then he decides to leave. And does so, I feel like on this too, this type of politician, I think it might stick around, but also Cuomo himself, I've been kind of curious to see where he goes, because he doesn't seem like the type to just disappear into the ether, right? Like, he's probably still going to be doing these lobbying things, working in the background, like Skyy said. I could definitely see him being that kind of guy, being a big donor for different organizations. Like, I think he's going to have influence still. It's just a matter of what that's going to look like. I think he's someone that I want to keep an eye on and see where he goes, because that, I think, will give us a cue too.
Mm-hmm. And that was something that people were speculating about pretty wildly in 2020, is like, when there were the initial concerns about Joe Biden's being all there was this idea people had, and when Cuomo was showing this intense perceived competence, people had this idea, like, is he going to run up in 2024? Are they going to do a surprise convention where they make him the nominee all of a sudden? Was Cuomo going to be Biden's running mate? That was a question that came up.
God, that would have been horrible.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing, is like, Cuomo isn't going to go away. That's what I was going to think of, is like, he comes from one of the most prominent Democratic families, the Cuomo family. His dad was governor. His younger brother is a CNN anchor. He's not going away either.
Has he said anything about his brother's
Chris?
allegations?
I mean, I don't follow CNN. I'm assuming he's... I'm not sure what he would even say.
My brother, he's a sexual assaulted, but everybody is. All Kumos.
I mean, it definitely is weird that Chris's statement hasn't been publicized, but also, if you were Chris Cuomo, you wouldn't want to say anything either. But yeah, I feel like because of Andrew Cuomo's like position and his loyalty to the party, and having held, like, the governor of New York is a pretty safely held Democratic position, but it's not one that comes lightly. It is like one of the most populated states. New York City is a gem in terms of being able to put that on your resume. And he would be seen as competent enough for some kind of cabinet gig. So 2024, he could come back. I'm just telling people to be, cautious of that.
Yeah, I think exactly what Skyy was saying. I feel like Cuomo's a prime candidate for kind of falling into the woodworks and just not being in the public light, because he's, as much as, we're joking about him or whatever, he is very politically savvy. I mean, he hasn't been making it in this for no reason for so long, and he hasn't had so much backing for so long for no reason. So, like I said it a little bit earlier, but like, him resigning was definitely a tactical move. I mean, him going through a kind of for lack of a better word, bloody kind of impeachment trial would have looked awful for him, because, yeah, it would have made him look tough, but at the same time, it's the Delta variant's a thing, COVID's on the rise again. If he was seen as a selfish person who continues to fight while there's bigger problems to deal with, that's really bad for him. So I think that the resignation was the first step. And the fact that in his resignation, he didn't say, like, I am guilty, I did do these things. Like, he skirted around. I'm sorry they interpreted it that way. I have an old way of doing things, and people don't understand that. I do make jokes that can offend people. They felt this way when they were offended. All this language doesn't actually put the impetus on him. So I think we're going to see him kind of fading away, but not actually. Like, he's going to, like what Skyy was saying earlier, I think Cuomo's a prime candidate. I don't think he'll be in the public light. I really don't think, maybe I'm wrong, but I really don't think he'll be back in the public light. I don't think a lot of Democratic politicians are going to want to take a gamble on Cuomo. Like, I don't think they're going to want to have him front and center, because he's going to look really bad on them.
This is something I was just thinking of too, because at least I remember the New York Speaker of the House said something to the effect of, like, had he not resigned, we were ready to draw articles of impeachment. But I'm also just wondering, like, taking the heat specifically for sexual misconduct, do you think that lets him off the hook for things like the COVID response, like the nursing home debacle, like any other perceived or potential breach of power that he could have been on the hook for? And this is, just pure speculation on my end, but, clearly resigning for this kind of lets him off the hook for everything else, at least for now.
Yeah, I think people are not going to be paying as much attention because this is the big thing, right now. You do still have the very consistent people who have been talking about the nursing home deaths, and a lot of people who have consistently been talking about overreaches of power, but I really think those are kind of behind it. And I think because it's been COVID, he got away with not having to deal with the repercussions of that stuff, because we are in a global pandemic, and it's really hard. I mean, we've seen through years of other politicians taking power, it's really hard to change leaders in a time of unrest and a time of like uncertainty. Like, you don't want to be changing your leaders because that could fuck shit up. So I think that protected him considerably for a lot of these other things that we've seen. But I agree. I think this is just getting him out. They're going to count that as like, okay, he's gone. We don't have to worry about it anymore. And it's going to kind of quiet down.
Yeah, I think one of the big reasons why he was like, yeah, definitely not going to let them impeach me is because then we really have to talk about all of the other, especially big name Democrats who have been accused of doing other sexual assault things, and they have just been swept under the rug. But I do think he's not going to face any repercussions. I think it's just like one of those, like how Trump did it, when he just so many bad things happened. It's like, how can you even keep track, and how do you know what to punish first, because there's just so many bad things. And until he decides to be in the public light and have people actively being able to be like, so what about this, he won't face any of those repercussions. He'll just, maybe the attorney general will try to get him, maybe like she'll come out and call the shooters out on him, but
On that,
I don't think so. I think he should.
I don't think any politician in America can get in trouble for any of this, because if one of them goes down, all of them have to.
They all do, yeah. It's the domino effect. It's just waiting to happen, though. So this could be the straw that breaks the camel's back, but
I mean, we have to hope and pray that, accountability and justice for everyone who suffers as a result of this thing does happen. But institutional forces like this create some of the safest places for these kinds of people to hide.
I think it's been kind of related, but not totally. So this is back on the conversation about like Democrats and the way they reacted to a lot of things and kind of how that looks. I think it's been really telling, the amount of people I've seen who have made the comment of like, well, we're doing this to Cuomo, but no one did this to Trump. And it's like, there's this sense of like perceived betterness, like, again, like a patting themselves on the back for like, Cuomo did this and we got him. He's one of ours, but we got him for it. And Republicans don't do that. So we're better than them. And I just think the last thing the Democratic Party needed was people going, we have the moral high ground. Look how good we are. Because that's, I think, a big problem that alienates a lot of voters. It alienates a lot of people, is this perceived sense of like, look how great we are. We're so much better than everybody else. We hold to our own moral standards. And it's like, oh, stop.
Which is the worst reason, because like, if you believe that like there should be justice for people who get hurt by sexual misconduct, you need to believe that. You can't just do it because it's politically expedient. And it's particularly telling when the same amount of people who engaged in commentary about Kavanaugh, commentary about Trump, then were able to make excuses for Biden. That
not all acknowledge it
mm-hmm.
at all.
Or come up with convenient excuses, or like just engage in like very toxic victim blaming. And it's like, how could you? And I mean, to be fair, Trump engaged in some of it as well. Like he had Bill Clinton's accusers come out to like the debate he had against Hillary one time. So both parties, but that's the thing. Both parties engage in, you know, parading out survivors of trauma to gain political points. So that's a disgusting practice that, you know, needs to end, because this is it's one of those problems that for me exists outside of ideology. It's just something that needs to be solved, period. It can't just be left up to my team's better because we do it less, or because we do more things related to it, which is why you should pick our side. That's always the worst reason to do it. But I think in Joe Biden's case, it's particularly telling that to get him across the finish line, people got in trouble for saying this. I still kind of hold on to this line of, you know, they fundamentally killed Me Too to get Biden across the finish line. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on, like, what does that entail? What does that really look like fundamentally? Because it went from like a foreground issue to just swept under the rug. And I know the pandemic has that effect on every issue, but
not about sexual assault. Like people still get sexually assaulted during the pandemic. Like it has happened since the age of time. And I think the real thing is the fact that the Me Too movement was taken over by a lot of white feminists. And then those white feminists didn't like Trump, so they were going to go all in on whoever it was, and they didn't care about the repercussions. They didn't care about if that person actually fit their values. And they truly just ignored every single victim and every single video and photo they have seen of Joe Biden being disgusting and uncomfortable to girls and women, I will say, not women of all ages, girls and women. And they're just like, I guess it's fine because he's not Trump, because Trump did more and did it worse and has done worse things. And Biden said he didn't mean to. And he's such a touchy old man. Like, no, like this has been something that has been joked about in like politics for so long, and you just allowed it to happen. It's like Harvey Weinstein all over again.
Well, I'm going to be pretty pessimistic. Not that I've been particularly optimistic this entire time, but I'm going to be a little pessimistic. And, you know, I think Me Too was a really good moment, but I actually would argue that it didn't change a lot. And I'm saying that from a place of, like Skyy said, sexual assault, sexual harassment, rape, all these things have happened forever, right? These are not new concepts. And yes, Me Too made it more, I guess, comfortable to openly talk about it, or it made it like more socially acceptable to talk about it openly, but it's not like people didn't know. I mean, like people have always known this stuff has been happening. This is not a new idea. Like, it's just a matter of, I guess, maybe you could argue that the shift was that people were, again, openly talking about it more, which is a positive thing. However, I didn't see it taking any actual, like, I mean, there were some people who got hit, like celebrities, and I think that's really important because, my God, the amount of celebrities that, I don't even want to get into that, but like, I don't know. I just feel like it was, I don't want to say doomed to fail, but like, these things are so complicated. And it's why I think Cuomo will never see any repercussions. I don't think any politician's going to see any repercussions, because even getting people who don't have a lot of political power or influence don't get got on these kind of cases very often. I mean, conviction rates for things like this are very, very low. They're hard to prove. You don't have a lot of flat out evidence. And if you do, it's usually really traumatizing for the victim, so they don't want to do it. Like, I just, as much as I appreciated Me Too making this something people could talk about, I also don't think I didn't think it was gonna make a huge shift, which is, again, very pessimistic. And I'm sorry for that. But it's just around that.
I think it's fair to talk about events in the zeitgeist, with a critical eye. And, as a man, I'm going to just encourage the audience to take what I have on all this with a grain of salt.
And a shot of lime.
And a shot of lime, yes. But it is interesting the way that, and I don't know if I want to shift the lens to Me Too necessarily, but it did kind of implode without anyone's real input, because it kind of was co-opted by popular media in a sense, right? And it's
by white women and white women celebrities.
No offense to Gabby, but yes.
Yes, Gabby.
No, I mean, I know it's yeah. I mean, I'm fully aware.
Yeah, Rose
McGowan.
Yeah.
It started, so with the thing about Me Too that I find interesting is that it started as a hashtag, and it was mostly working women of color trying to just share everyday experiences pertaining to the matter. And its co-optation by people with more fame, more celebrity, more money really is an interesting avenue to understand what happened. But also, I guess its salience as an issue, it lasted a lot longer than most things do in America. Especially considering Trump's America, how you had a new news cycle every fucking day, it seemed. The fact that Me Too, I mean, yeah, it was at least a year and a half. It stayed as a thing people could focus on. It was a thing that people could concretely use as a lens to kind of make sense of what was going on around them. And there were stories pertaining to it every day. And it, there is a net positive of highlighting for people who don't know just how pervasive and how prevalent the issue of this kind of misconduct and the kind of trauma that people live with is. But at the same time, the way it was handled in popular media and the way it was co-opted, and especially seeing how it was used to a politically expedient end by Democrats, and then as soon as it was no longer useful, they just swept it under the rug.
Yeah,
it's frustrating.
Yeah, I feel back on what Skyy was saying earlier, it literally, I think it might have stayed in the public consciousness partly because Trump was president, right? Because there was all these accusations and it was advantageous and it was a very easy way to hate. I mean, everyone was hating Trump, and then it was an easy way to oh yeah, also he's in this, a lot of women have been assaulted by him, so it's that kind of narrative. And then as soon as Biden hit the stage, like Skyy was saying, it, the white women Democrats, right, are oh well, he just does, he's an old man, I mean, he does things. It's I don't know what you're trying to say. Well,
especially
co-opting these kind of issues. I've always had a problem. I think we're kind of touching on this. Sexual assault, sexual harassment, things of this nature shouldn't be political issues. And I know that's speaking that's very idealistic of me to say, but there are some issues I just think should be you're a decent person and therefore you don't think they are okay. And I mean, I guess I could lump in a lot of other things into this too. You'd think racism would be in that group too, but nah. So, to me, when I hear these things co-opted, I'm just God, it's so icky, it's so gross. It's it shouldn't be a political stance for you to believe survivors. That shouldn't be a political stance to me, but I digress.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's really fair. And I think especially when you had a giant field of candidates in 2020 that they could have all coalesced around. I'm just wondering what it was that made Biden attractive. Because yes, he won. Okay, we can say he won decisively in South Carolina. I'm not even going to dispute that anymore. But it was far from over. That was only the fourth primary to happen at that point. And the fact that Obama makes a call and says, let's all declare for Biden. And it's like, okay, forget Bernie at this point. There were several other, if it had to come down to a male candidates who don't have a record of this.
Mm-hmm.
I would have voted for Cory Booker. No, I wouldn't have.
I mean, I don't know. I personally love a.
I lied.
I like all the guys in the Rosario Dawson's boyfriend club. Eric Andre.
Pete Buttigieg would be too if he wasn't gay. If he sadly wasn't gay in his eyes, I know he doesn't want to be gay. I know he prayed the gay away so many times.
I don't know. It's like you're saying though. Like it's one of those things that's not ideological. It's one of those things that like, as a measure of like living in a civilized society or having some degree of like modernity, you should be against this kind of behavior. You should see it as like a red flag, period. That's how I feel about it. And that, you know, it makes someone unfit for public service. I think that's a fair thing to say and believe. Mm-hmm. But it's especially frustrating when you see people say it. When you had people actually have hope that like maybe there could be some kind of justice. And when you know how personally and deeply this can fuck someone up, to see people get thrown under the bus. And I made the mistake of reading Tara Reade's statements, and it's pretty monstrous. And the fact that it was just swept under the rug, she was treated as, well, you're a Russian bot for opening up about this.
How dare you talk about your assault?
It's deeply upsetting, and it's indicative of a certain pathology that is toxic, deeply ingrained, and prevents people from coming forward about painful things that have happened and bringing people to justice. And that's not to say that our justice system's perfect or handles these issues well, but you would think if someone believes in something, it would be this much. And the bar's that low. Mm-hmm.
The bar is in hell. It is on fire.
Anyways, that's my male feminism for the day.
I kind of on this, maybe this is not that related, so you can cut it if it doesn't make sense, but I feel like one of the only issue areas that I've found is like, I want to say bipartisan, which is like such a weird word, is actually the death penalty, which is so weird. Like you see it more in Republican states, but I feel like I see a lot of Democrats who are like, but if they do something bad enough, yes. And I'm like, hold on, what is this? Like, why is this the thing? Why are we agreeing on this? Like, I don't know. That might be out of left field, but I'm just thinking about issues that are quote unquote bipartisan, things that tend to be uniting. And I almost feel like the American citizens want to kill people they deem bad is like the one thing. They might disagree on who's bad enough to kill, but like usually there's agreement on that. Me being someone who is very against the death penalty in every way, shape, and form, just putting that out there. But it's a very bizarre thing.
It's really crazy that there's like a lot of the people who are on death row are like these like murderous rapists or like just like someone who went beyond the line. And then when you have it on the kind of like other side of the spectrum where it's not, they didn't murder them, they might have not even like assaulted them to that extent, but we're just going to let that be okay and let everybody believe that assaulting people is okay as long as you don't do this part, because then you're going to be on death row. Maybe. Depending on the state.
Well, also just like, I guess the death penalty, even though I see it's a welcome to aggression, right? Is, you know, on what meaningfully do Democrats and Republicans disagree on, aside from different culture war arenas? Broadly speaking, when it comes to crime and punishments, foreign policy, how we dictate our economic will around the world, they seem to be pretty hand in hand on that stuff, and that's really the stuff that matters in terms of what America needs to get done in that sense, right? So I'm not sure how, if you really only have two parties that seem to win and contest elections, they would have a infinite arena of issues to disagree on meaningfully. At some point, for the actual business of running the American ship of state, they would have to agree on this kind of archaic cruelty in systems like sanctions, like the death penalty, like the drug war, like I mean, you can insert issue here, but that, like, that American state of ship of state business, they seem to have a lot to agree on. And I mean, that's why you can find people with somewhat monstrous tendencies on either side of the aisle. Because, you know, if you're willing to do X, you'd certainly be willing to do Y. But it's unique how Democrats flounder compared to Republicans. And it's also unique to see some of the fandom that pops up around them. So I think, you know, this is to get us out of this black hole of a topic we're in. I mean, we all remember that phase last year of everyone saying they were Cuomo-sexual.
Oh.
So let's just take a second to cringe collectively as we harken back to that time.
And how, and even not just Cuomo, like people...
Big Gretch?
A few years ago, it was like, oh my God, Joe Biden, look at him. He was hot in one picture from 8,000 years ago. Like, him and Obama are best friends. This is amazing. BFF. Like, it was disgusting. And
Tim Kaine was hotter when he was younger.
Tim Kaine was hotter when he was younger. We all saw them photos. What is he doing? He's
still a senator from Virginia.
Okay, at least he's doing more than Hillary, that bitch. Sorry. But no, there's just I think the real problem is yes, the idea of the Democrats and the Republicans being the same side of or the two different sides of the same coin. But there's a lot of other politicians who literally, I feel like they woke up one day, they flipped the coin, and they were like, I guess I'm a Democrat now, but I'm gonna have all of these Republican ideas. But they're just like from whatever state they're from, and they're like, who's really gonna win? Is it gonna be a Democrat or is it gonna be a Republican? Oh, it's a Democrat? I guess that's what I am. And they don't have the actual sense of quote unquote morals that Democrats are supposed to have. And then like the people who are Republicans don't have the ruthlessness of how other Republicans are. And it's absolute like bullshit, and why this two-party system isn't working, and why you shouldn't just only vote Republican or only vote Democrat because you believe that they'll, like, because they're in this party, they're good, and not, hey, let me look into this politician. Oh, wait, they're a piece of shit. Let's not vote for them because they're a piece of shit.
I think, too, I don't know, I think people have the desire to want to feel like politicians and celebrities and people of that nature are like, I said this earlier kind of, but like are like them, and like they can relate to them, and they're all these different pieces. I mean, really, like politicians, people have said this 1,000 times, they're like celebrities. People treat them like celebrities, like hence the homosexual stuff and the hot Joe Biden, and like all this kind of stuff is like very familiar because it's what people do with their favorite celebrities. Oh, they would never do X because they're a really good person. It's like, you don't know that person. Like, that's not real. That's not a real relationship you've developed. And I think the same thing with politicians, and I think maybe even more with politicians, because when you vote for them, you're basically you're giving them a little bit of power, right? You are basically taking the tiny bit of power you have, and you're going, I'm vesting it in you to do a thing that I like. And when they say, I do all these things that you like, and you go, cool, here you go, and then they turn out to be a shitty person, like that could be kind of hard because you're like, oh, I gave them that power. I actively chose that because they told me that they were like me. And so I think when people look at that, they see not only the values and morals of the party and say, oh, that's what I like, but also they look at the person. They like, okay, how else can I connect with them? What else about them is cool? Obama plays basketball. I like basketball. Like, it's this kind of like connection that you feel, and it's not recognizing that they're in a completely different zone, especially the higher up in government you get, your senators, your president. I mean, I obviously have never been president. And I will say that the job probably sucks dick. Honestly, it probably sucks. And I don't know what kind of things they're faced with. I don't know how that position changes you as a person. Maybe these people went in really thinking that they would do something good, or maybe someone started following this politician back when they were just a state senator, a state congressperson, where they comparatively have a lot less power. And as that went up, they started to get kind of morphed and changed by the system that we have and like the way they had to compromise. Like, I think it's just easier though to connect with them or feel like they're like you, but it's really hard when they get to that high level because they're not. The president is not like you, and they never will be.
Right, and it's interesting how people can project these parasocial relationships, on celebrities, on politicians specifically, and it's making me notice the kind of consumer relationship we have to electoral politics in America, right? And it's kind of in the same way that people identify with the brands they consume. Mac users are very, prone to be like, well, come on, it's better than Android or PC. I personally don't care. I think computers are the devil, but that's besides
the
me.
real thing. It's better than Windows. That's the real.
They're all the devil, but sure, the better one.
On my
sure,
Windows computer.
Mac is better, or even like
I hate Windows so much.
Well, but it's also like, again, you can sync your identity into your consumer choices. I mean, how many useless arguments have we all had about which fast food joint is better? How much of us have built a posting identity or like have semi-ironically joked about like, I would have my wedding at Taco Bell? Like,
I feel like that would be a very affordable wedding though.
If
they're going in the affordability, I'm with that because you can feed a lot of people under a small budget.
Easily under $1,000. Yeah, and even just like the amount of people who will identify with a purchase or with a brand even after knowing certain things, like Chick-fil-A's homophobia. A lot of people will either like then upplay their own homophobia to justify their consumer purchase, or they'll just be like, oh, you guys are being soft, the customer service is great. And I'm not even sure, like, have you heard the conspiracy theory that Chick-fil-A employees are people who like the organization has dirt on, and that's why they're pushed into being so nice in their customer service?
Like they have their families in like hostage, or like literally just blackmailing them and be like, if you don't give the best customer service, we're gonna shoot your puppy. And because that's how it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't, like, no one in the world is that happy or that apologetic, especially if you worked in any kind of fast food establishment through the pandemic. I bet your ass you're not gonna be like, have a great day. At least not genuinely. I say that sarcastically a lot. But you're not gonna be the fake happy, nice that Chick-fil-A employees are forced to be. And even if you are, it's just absolutely like ridiculous to make your employees just, it seems like they're afraid that they can't even like be normal humans and be like, wow, this customer sucks, or just treat them like how they're treating them.
Yeah. I guess maybe to bring the topic back to the head, being an ex-Democrat and like kind of coming out of that world, a lot of these, cult of personality initiatives around different Democratic politicians, a lot of it is AstroTurf. A lot of it is like ginned up. But I think when you're in that deep of territory of loyalty to this party, you start just engaging in it to feel good or to like feel validated, because you just keep seeing like, we can't do X, Y, and Z because the parliamentarian said we couldn't, or whatever excuse it is for the day. But then you'll see like a TikTok of Big Gretch just walking in a mask, and you're just like, okay, she's badass. But like, or even like just all these Joe and Kamala, like, how long are they going to keep walking? How long are they going to keep walking in all these promotional stills?
Not walking to actually change the pandemic or help anyone or actually make the changes with these horrible governors in the South are just like, if you have a mask mandate, you're not getting funding, which is happening in Florida. In
Florida, yeah. But I think like it speaks to, and we said this on past episodes, and I think, you know, this is another arena this comes up in, is like this idea that there's no meaningful engagement in politics aside from self-validation, that you're, you know, really just identifying with these politicians or identifying with this persona around them as a kind of self-validation exercise, or as a kind of way to feel good about your side, instead of participating in or believing in any real project for change and reform or exerting power in some kind of way. So that's really how I understand all of the people who made a big showing of being homosexual, or, you know, people who do stuff that's kind of cringeworthy, like, yes, that's my governor, or and honestly, like, I say this as someone who is a Bernie stan and has kind of been just recently disappointed by some of the things he's doing and saying, is like, you can't really tie your self-validation to politicians who you in theory support, because politics is not a spectator sport. You know what I mean? It's not just something that you get to watch and it's like, oh, my team wins, so I get to feel good because I'm wearing the jersey. But because politics is largely a spectacle in our country now, that's what it's become. So as frustrating as it is to look at people who are quote unquote homosexual now doing a 180 on it, it's kind of a symptom of the problem more than it is like the problem itself.
Well, and as much as it's frustrating to see people now doing the 180, now that it looks bad to be in support of Cuomo, I do have to say, like, I prefer that to them doubling down and claiming everything he's doing is fine. Like, because your politicians are people that you're not always going to agree with every single facet of what they're doing. Like, that just is a thing. Again, I think it's very hard because you are, like I said earlier, kind of giving that one little piece of power you have to that person and saying, like, please do good things with it. And if they don't do good things with it, then you feel probably guilt or you feel bad, especially for supporting them. And, you know, as long as people are able to recognize, like, this person is not your personality, this person is not someone you know, like, this person could do things that you don't approve of later, like, and acknowledge that and be real about it instead of being like, oh, I always hated Cuomo. Well, like, no, you didn't. Like, you know, at least be honest. But if you're able to say, I no longer support this person because new information's come out, that's way better than doubling down and saying, like, well, even if they do it, I still think they did better things. It's like, well, probably not that. Or saying, I never liked them to begin with, when that's, like, blatantly a lie. You know, it's not great, but it's something.
Yeah, people talk a lot about, like, ooh, don't people need a space to grow and show growth? But we see less and less in that every day. And the people who demand, like, the opportunity to show growth also, like, never seem to go exercising that as something they do themselves. And, you know, the example I'm going to run with as my pet example is Hillary Clinton's record on LGBT issues in 2016, right? I mean, of course, you're a Democrat in 2016, you're for it, that's fine. But if there was just a subtle admission of, yeah, I supported DOMA back in the day and I was in favor of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I was wrong, I'm with you guys now, that's all it would have took. But it was this repeat denial and this repeat non-engagement of the question, and this kind of doubling down in problematic ways that we see. I mean, people of all stripes do it, but we see Democrats do it a lot. And that was one of the questions I saw come up a lot in the height of Me Too was, well, then what happens to people who are guilty or in trouble? Like, don't they get a time to grow? Don't they get a space to learn or apologize? And it's like, I'll believe it when I see it. Let's see some apologies. Let's see some growth. But I think it's just become such a productive use of the content machine, and it's become another spectacle such that I'm kind of pessimistic again. I'm not sure what's meaningfully going to change.
Yeah, I think it's important too to be distinct about what you can grow from. Like, okay, I'm always of the opinion that people can change and be better, even if they do things that are pretty bad early on. But do I want those people as my politicians? Do I want sexual assaulters as my politicians? No, probably not. I don't really want those people to have power. They've shown that they're not responsible with power. However, in terms of like, not to say that I love that Hillary Clinton had negative views on LGBT people and supported policies that hurt us, frankly. But I will say that like, that's something that as much as I'm not super cool with, I'm like, yeah, maybe you can grow if you're willing to acknowledge it. But I think there should be distinction of like, when people are, can't they grow and change? It's like, yeah, I'm totally down for you to change your opinion based on new information or change based on, social or if you've learned or grown. I'm totally cool with that. But like, I don't really think you learn and grow out of being an assaulter. And I don't think we should give assaulters power. Like, yes, I think they should be locked away forever. Probably not. We could probably do some reform work and do things that's not really the most productive thing. But do I want them to be the governor of New York? No, I do not. Like, that's too much power. Take it away. Like, no, thank you. So I think there's an important distinction there in that growth narrative. I think people tend to be oversimplistic about it. Like, everyone can grow and change. It's like, well, yes, but that doesn't mean we should give them power. Next question. Like,
I think the craziest thing about this situation of someone gets called out and now they decided that it's time for them to grow. And it's just like, you're telling me that between the time that the incident where everyone knows about it happened and the time you issued this apology that's usually a notes app apology, something bullshit and something very basic that some PR person wrote, you're telling me that you have learned and you have grown and you don't feel that way anymore, or you're not that person anymore, when you literally just exuded the behaviors and you have done absolutely nothing to grow. I think it really pisses me off when I see those and it's like, I'm growing or someone is teaching me, and it's like, okay, but then what is that? Because then you should be able to physically tell me what you're doing to grow. And he can't even grow from this because he's not even acknowledging that it is a problem, which a lot of them don't do. It's always the apology of, I'm sorry you felt this way. I'm sorry you're offended. I'm sorry you are ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it's important also to, like, with that, parse through the politics language like I was talking about earlier. Like, Cuomo was a politics language guy, and he didn't apologize. Like, he said he was apologizing, but it wasn't an apology. And being able to understand that that's not real and that's not genuine and that's not a basis for growth. Like, you can't grow from something like that. And being aware of those political answers, the Hillary Clintons, I've always, or just not acknowledging as another political move, just hoping that people just kind of take her at face value now as opposed to acknowledging the stuff before. I think it's like super important because yeah, there's a lot of language manipulation that's really important to pay attention to and like pay credence to. But I agree totally.
Yeah, bottom line, what this comes down to is honesty. All we're demanding really is just honesty from people in government, people who are in power, to just be responsible with it. It's not even that high of an ask. And that's just something to remember too, is like when you ask for, the kind of collective reform we're all asking for, or when you're talking about a better world, or when you're just like trying to make sense of some of this stuff, like just hold in your mind just for a second, like you're not asking for much. A lot of us are not asking for much, to be honest. And that's what this comes down to with this Cuomo business. Of you ever hear, I love calling this new coalition of people Blue MAGA, of of people who just like are going off on you for not showing the degree of deference or loyalty to a Democratic politician that they expect of you. The call for accountability, the call for honesty is not a big ask. So, any closing thoughts for this episode?
I feel like you wrapped up kind of what I was feeling, is just reminding ourselves this isn't something that is ridiculous to try to request, or that they should be responsible power. I mean, what you said, it should be a given that you're being responsible, and that if I'm giving you a little bit of the only thing I have, right, to influence the system really in a very direct way, I expect you to be responsible with it and not abuse your staff. And if you do, to take responsibility and leave your position, like, and for your people working under you to say something when they see it happening. It shouldn't take a whole attorney general investigation for this. Frankly, it's a waste of but like it shouldn't have needed to take all of her time and all this energy and months of all this stuff.
And taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, I mean, taxpayer dollars, time, and we're in a really hard point in our like nation's history. Like, why during a pandemic are we wasting our resources on Andrew Cuomo? Like, if he had just been responsible when this stuff came out, taken it and, stepped down, we would have been able to save a lot. But yeah, that's what you said, basically.
I think it's just so telling that after all of these accusations of sexual assault on all aisles of just everywhere in politics, especially, that there aren't more or easier ways for these people to report it, or there aren't necessary things. Like, if someone is being accused of sexual assault, we take them out of their position. We automatically do a trial, and then we appoint someone else to be governor. Isn't there a lieutenant governor literally for this reason? And we do a fair trial. We line up the witnesses. We actually try to figure this out, and if we find them guilty, then they're not going to be governor anymore. And it stops right there. Or whatever political. There's nothing even in the works of saying, like, if you have an accusation, we need to figure this out. Even until we have something put in place, we can't trust that is something that actually is cared about by the Democratic Party or the Republican or any party. Because it's always going to be, let's make multiple survivors come out and say that they have been assaulted, so more of those survivors can come out, and then we can do something. And not just, or even like a independent way for people to let these accusations, like, give these accusations to someone who is outside of that actual political party or whatever, that is here to look through these allegations and actually take them seriously.
Like an independent party or something?
Yeah, just like it literally should be, it could be a fucking branch of the government. I don't give a fuck. Or like, because it happens this much, and they need someone specifically to do this work, because no one's taking it seriously, and this is just going to continue to happen in different political entities and facets and bullshit.
Anyway, with that happy note.
Anyways, thanks again, Gabby, Skyy, for coming through. and for laundering my male sexism on this program.
Shut up.
The show is Greenhouse Gaslighting. You can find us on Twitter at PodGreenhouse. If folks want to follow either of you, where should they go?
Don't follow me, that's stalking. And I will call the police.
If you follow Greenhouse Gaslighting on Twitter, you'll see my handle, and that's where I don't do anything political on my Twitter though. It's just a bunch of anime bullshit. So have fun.
I'll plug your handle in the tweet. And yeah, you'll find the links to all our socials. Just follow us. I post wacky memes on Instagram every now and then. No one uses Facebook. Don't worry about it.
I like to watch cat and dog videos.
Yeah, but like that's probably the only thing people use Facebook for. And yeah, I will be making an appearance on the Not Safe for Wonks podcast sometime this week. You'll see it. I'll link it. So make sure to catch us there. So thanks again, dear listeners, for coming to visit us at the Greenhouse. Until next time, take care.